Hello, everyone. We will get started in a few moments. We just want to give everyone a little bit of time to get on. If you know someone who can use this information, please make sure you go ahead and share this out on your Facebook pages. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you guys for tuning in to our collective conversation. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. We're just giving everyone a little bit of time to get on. Please share this with anyone who you know could use this information. Today's topic is 5 common mistakes to avoid in business. So we'll be talking about the most common mistakes that we see on a regular basis in business and how you can avoid these mistakes in your business or when protecting your brand. Do, do, do. Welcome everyone to our collective conversation, 5 mistakes to avoid in business. Thank you for tuning in. For those of you who are new to us, we are 5 of the women of the Collective Legal and Crisis Management Firm. We service individuals who are dealing with any kind of legal matters, and we have a team of professionals, attorneys in different industries and different practice areas, and we are here just to be a resource to everyone, to share information during this pandemic, because we know that a lot of people just need some information that may not be readily available because a lot of people don't share. So we're just here to be a resource, to share tips. For those of you who don't know me, I am Marissa Grayson. I am the founder and the managing attorney of the Collective Legal and Crisis Management Firm. I have on with me 4 other ladies of the firm who are amazing. We have Shannon Davis, who is an attorney, Janae Coffey, who is our operations manager and also is a consultant for businesses. We have Nicole Updegraff, who is our communication strategist and the lead of our crisis management division, and Natalie Howard, who is an attorney as well. So welcome, ladies, and welcome everyone who is tuning in. Again, for those of you who are just jumping on or catching the replay, thank you for tuning in, and we're going to just jump right into this conversation. So one thing that we know, well, let me preface this first. Firstly, our conversations are pretty informal. Obviously, we're all at home. Ignore any children that you hear in the background. Everybody got kids.
Right.
Also, we are attorneys and professionals, but these conversations were meant to be informal conversations. Essentially, they're the same types of conversations that we have just amongst us, and you guys get to tune into this. So we're not going to be super buttoned up. We're very relaxed at the moment, and we're just going to be here again to be a resource and share information. So firstly, I would like, is anybody else need to say anything ahead of time before we jump into the content?
No.
I just wanted to add that, as Marissa said, this is very informal, and nothing that we provide to you today should be construed as legal advice. We want to make sure that everybody understands that we do not represent you in any capacity until you have retained our firm. And of course, like I said, nothing that we say today should be directly applied to any kind of legal situation that you're currently having. If you have any additional questions after hearing what we have to say today, the best thing for you to do would be to consult an attorney or give us a call, and we'd be more than happy to give you a consultation if necessary.
Thank you.
Thank
Always.
you, Attorney Howard, because I was on some, no, let's just jump right in.
You're good.
Attorney.
Always thinking like an attorney.
Always, thank you. Exposure, limiting our exposure. Thank you for that.
Right. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to jump right in now that we have the disclaimer on record. So we just wanted to come on and talk about the common business mistakes that we see. Oftentimes we see people who they come to us and they are coming to us after the fact, after there's a disaster, after a business relationship has gone bad, after they've been sued, after all of these different things have happened. And one of the most important things that we know is that being proactive is one of the most important things when you're doing business or running a brand, right? So proactivity is the best activity, is one thing that I like to say. And another thing is that it's way less expensive to hire an attorney to prevent your problems than to fix your problems.
Amen. Are we saying amen? Amen to that.
Amen.
I was gonna start snapping.
Right.
So we're all gonna share one major tip that we see, or one mistake that we see most commonly, and then we'll also be taking comments and questions. If you have any questions, make sure you go ahead and type those in the comments. Again, sharing is caring. If you know anyone who needs this information, any entrepreneurs, any brand builders, any people who are thinking of inventing something or coming up with some other way, a side hustle, anything like that, please share this out to your networks, to your friends, to your family, so that they can have this information. So jumping right in, we are going to start with mistake number one. Who got mistake number one? I forgot. Mistake number one. There we go. All right. So, Janae, what is the biggest mistake that you think people need to avoid when it comes to business?
So mistake number one is failing to plan. And a lot of times people have this great idea and they want to immediately start executing the idea. And so the problem, though, is that when you fail to plan, you don't know all of the intricate pieces of the business. So, for instance, a lot of times people pick up a hobby and then they see that this hobby can bring in some money. So they start to monetize on it, but they still they still fail to plan in business. So what I would start doing, and this is something that I suggest to a lot of my clients, is to create a business plan. There are definitely a lot of components to starting a business plan. You have to have a company description, market analysis, a description of your management and just your organizational structure. So, your legal entity, all of those things need to be in a business plan. But a lot of times people become overwhelmed, or they just don't want to hire anybody to do it. And then they just kind of start, they run in, they start their business, but then down the line, there's no plan. And, a lot of times in business, you have to make certain decisions that can be pretty risky. And when you make those decisions without the plan in place, there's where, you start losing money. You're afraid to pivot if needed, if your business needs to go into a different direction. All of that should be answered in a business plan. And so that is mistake number one. People just fail to plan.
And just to piggyback off of what Janae said with regards to the failing to plan, oftentimes we think that we have to have this robust business plan when we start. And so people sort of get trigger shy because we think we have to have this big plan, this 40-page plan. And we've seen that they've got all these resources out there that allow us to do business plans, but it gets to be overwhelming. You feel like, you're inundated with information, but you're not. It doesn't seem like it prepares you really for business. It prepares you to freak out. And so what I tell people to do is sort of create an outline It's the same thing that I said with contracts. And I believe it's something that we all learned in elementary school. What is your who, what, where, when, why, and how? Make it as basic as possible. Who is it? Who's your target audience? Who is it that you're trying to reach? Who are you giving a product or service to, right? What is that product or service? Okay. When do you intend to give it? And that when can be your hours of operation. That could be when you decide to start business, right? Where you located? Do you have a e-commerce business, or do you have a brick and mortar that's in one particular place? Is that brick and mortar going to move to different places? You know, what is your thought process with your where, right? Why are you even doing this? What need are you meeting? You understand? Like, you know what I'm saying? What problem is it that you're solving? That's your why. And then how. And how is the one that we may take a little bit more time on, because you want to know how you're giving that service, how you're giving that product. Like I said, whether it's online, whether it's in person. So again, you go through your whole where, when, why, and how, and then you flesh it out. But at least have that basic plan written down so that you can have an understanding of your business and you can be able to give someone else that understanding. It doesn't make sense to move forward not being able to tell people what we're actually doing, why we're doing it, who we intend to reach, right? Where we intend to do it, and then when we intend to offer our product or service.
I like that too, because the other thing is a lot of people, when they start out, they don't even really know their position in the marketplace. And what I mean by that is, you know, if you have a hamburger stand, you should know, if you're trying to open up a hamburger stand in Inglewood, California, you should know however many other hamburger stands are in that same spot, so that you're not planning to fail. And a lot of times people don't do that research. So the market research is definitely necessary. There's a whole lot of people right now who are creating t-shirt businesses. Where are you, how do you position yourself in that marketplace? But then how do you set yourself apart? What do you offer that's going to give you that competitive advantage? And a lot of people are not able to answer that. And, you spend a lot of money to start up a business, and then you fail to plan because you didn't answer those simple questions.
And that also that is part of the why. Why am I doing this? What need am I doing? What problem am I solving? And the only way that you know what problem you're solving is if you actually do the research to determine what the problem is. One of the things that a lot of people get afraid about is, oh, well, I have a business that 100 other people have. However, how you need to be able to determine how your business is different. Someone made a comment about going down the bread aisle, right? You know how many different breads, how many different brands of bread we see, how many different kinds.
Right.
Not to say that you can't start a business that 100 different other people have started in the exact same place that they've started it, but you need to know that there are 100 other people in that place and what you're doing to set yourself apart from those 100 other bread makers.
Good stuff.
A lot of money to start up a business.
Awesome, ladies. All right. So is there anything that any of the other ladies want to add before we move on to mistake number 2? No? Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I believe Natalie is up.
Yes. Okay, ladies. Wonderful information on mistake number 1. Great segue for mistake number 2. Once you've decided, okay, what does my market look like, and what I'm going to do to set myself apart, and you have all of those ducks in a row from a creative standpoint, the next thing you need to think about is legally, what do you need to do to operate the business, and of course, limit your liability. Anytime you're going into business, no matter what kind of business you're having or that you're starting or you're going to be operating in, there is always a risk of lawsuits and financial liability. So you want to think about what kind of entity you want to form. Some people, a lot of businesses are operating out here right now as a sole proprietorship. It's just that individual, works as a freelancer, or they may be a 1099 contractor for different businesses or for different individuals, and they don't really have an entity formed. The importance of forming an entity is basically liability, asset protection and liability protection, personal liability protection. When you are properly established under an entity, it greatly reduces the risk that you will be held personally liable if someone sues you and wins in court, or if there's an accident or an incident relating to something that you're doing, aside from, of course, having the proper professional liability insurance. So, one thing that a lot of business owners just fail to do is properly form their entities. And, it's more than just, of course, just going down to the Secretary of State and saying, okay, I want to be an LLC, or I want to be an S Corp, or I want to be, a C Corp. It really is about following the rules and guidelines regarding properly forming those entities and having the correct, taking the correct formalities, I should say, in forming those entities. One of the main reasons why it's important is because of this concept called piercing the corporate veil. And the other attorneys on the line, I'm pretty sure, know all about that. Piercing the corporate veil basically means that you have done something wrong in your business that will allow people to not just sue your company if they're having an issue, but sue you personally. And so where that concept comes from is there is this theoretical veil between the shareholders or the owners or the officers of a corporation or an LLC, or the members of an LLC, and the actual LLC or a corporation or company itself, whatever entity you've chosen. There's this veil there that says, okay, if I'm doing business and I make a mistake, or I cost somebody money, or I cause them some damage to someone, then they can only go after the corporation's assets or the corporation's money. And my personal business, bank account or assets or property cannot be touched, essentially, in that litigation. I cannot be a party to that litigation because I am not the corporation. I am a separate entity. I'm an individual. Okay. And so what happens is a lot of times people either, like I said, they form an entity, or they don't do it the proper way, or they will not follow all the formalities necessary to properly maintain that entity. And when the lawsuit ensues through the discovery process, I don't want to get too legal on you guys, but through the discovery process, it is discovered that you have not been doing what you're supposed to be doing. You have not been crossing your T's and dotting your I's when it comes to your entity. And then from there, they say, oh, well, looks like I might be able to sue that individual officer too. And next thing you know, you're getting added into a lawsuit, and you're like, wait, what? I have a C Corp, I have an S Corp. You can't sue me. Oh, yes, they can, potentially, because you have not done what you were supposed to do. Especially if you are a single person LLC or a single person, corporation, sole shareholder, you're really, really exposed. So you really have to be on top of things if you want to protect your assets. So that is the basic concept of really forming that entity. You want to be able to be protected. You don't want your wife coming home one day, or your husband saying, there's a lien on our house and they're talking about foreclosure. And you're like, wait, what? We don't want that. Okay. It's going to cause a whole lot more problems than just, losing some property. So make sure you're forming the proper entities, and we understand you guys are not attorneys. You're not MBAs. A lot of you're not professionals, and that's what Melissa was talking about at the very beginning when she said we can save you so much money if you come to us in the beginning versus waiting until the problem happens and now we have to jump in on the back end and try to fix something. It costs maybe a few $100s to get it done the right way the first time. So if you're unsure on how to properly form your entity, how to properly maintain and manage your entity from a legal standpoint with regard to your particular state's rules on managing the entity, then it's the best money you can spend. Another problem that I see, and I'm so sorry, does anyone have anything to add to that before I go on to the next?
I was just going to say, at minimum, just to add to that, because I do know there are a lot of people that consistently operate, just under a sole proprietorship. So I always tell my clients that if you are, if you're in the beginning stages and you're operating under a sole proprietorship, I need to get my words together. Minimum, you should invest in some type of business insurance, liability insurance, just so you can
Absolutely.
have a layer of protection until you shift into a formal entity phase of your business. So that's just my not so legal advice.
There you go. You know, and there are so many different ways to protect yourself. This just being one of many, as Marissa just stated. You know, some people say, "Well, I don't have an entity, but I've got that liability insurance or that E&O insurance," and that's wonderful. But you know, if I told you you could protect yourself, give yourself an extra layer of protection for a couple $100s, would you not do that? You know, you want to do as much as you can, as quickly as you can. So, but I totally agree with that sentiment. The next piece I wanted to bring up was commingling.
One second before you push.
Oh yeah, go right
I
ahead.
just want to say one thing about the whole creating the entity, because a lot of people don't really understand that that separation. And I think it's really important for us to understand the separation. One thing that some people are visual, some people are not. But one thing that I show people is that we're individuals, like you said. So if everybody sees my pen, we are one individual, right? Mm-hmm. When we create that entity, the entity essentially stands out in front of us. Okay. And so as long as we're operating in our position as an officer of that entity, and we're not doing anything illegal that would cause that corporate veil to be pierced, then that thing stands out in front of us. In the event that there's a lawsuit or anything like that that's filed, then it should hit what's standing out in front of us.
That's right? Exactly right. If everything's being done properly, exactly.
As long as we're doing it properly. But people will, and so when you're operating in a sole proprietorship, there is nothing standing out in front of you to protect you from your personal assets, from your home, from your bank account, like she said, being attacked because you just decided to work on your own. And again, it's like she said, a sole proprietorship. So I think it's important that we really pay attention to that. Whatever entity you choose based on your conversation with your attorney, your whoever's helping you to set it up, make sure that you're choosing something to stand out in front of you.
And the other thing that I wanted to add to that was that some people don't understand what the formalities are. For instance, you know, an LLC, I like to compare an LLC in terms of like a hybrid, right? So it's kind of like sole proprietorship mixed with corporation, but not as many formalities as a corporation. So a lot of times corporations have to have like meeting minutes. They have to have a board of directors. Normally for an LLC, you don't really see that as often in terms of requirements, but it does depend on the state that you're in. And so people don't always think about those things. And then also when you talk about piercing the veil, you know, in terms of piercing the veil, what comes to mind is like, you know, intermingling funds. A lot of people start doing that and they're not taking care of their bookkeeping. And so that's when I always talk about that hobby versus that real business. When you're stepping into a real business, whether you choose to be sole proprietor, LLC, corporation, whatever, you should definitely start operating as a business, meaning that you are taking care of the bookkeeping. QuickBooks is super easy, you know, and if that's not you, you know, hire someone to do it. But the problem is that on the back end, when you start intermingling funds, if you were to ever get audited or anything like that, that's the first thing that they look at is your books. You know, what money is going in and out and how are you managing that money? So of course, there's other things too, fraud, you know, certain wrongdoings, all of those things.
You're actually segueing into my point too. Go right ahead. No, you're right on top of it. You're right on top of it. So absolutely. My second point was exactly what Janae just said, guys, about the commingling of assets, not just money,
right,
but also of other assets. So she's absolutely right when she's telling you guys, hey, that bank account should look very clean. Okay. You should not be, paying for personal expenditures with your business account or vice versa. Because again, when they're looking to see if the first thing that any good attorney is going to do when they're suing your entity is look to see if they can pierce that corporate veil and get to your personal assets. And just because they pierce that corporate veil and get to your personal assets does not mean they will also get your corporate assets. We're talking about in addition to your corporate assets, they can also, if there's not enough there, come after your personal assets. So that commingling is the biggest and fastest way for them to try to file that motion to pierce that corporate veil. Okay. So if you are doing the right thing and keeping your, I always tell people, if you have to, just use 2 separate banks for your business versus your personal. So you won't even be tempted to pull that card out, to pay for a personal expenditure. And if you have to, in some type of crunch or an emergency, make sure you notate it very clearly and that you pay the business account back right away, that kind of thing. You want to make sure that it's very clear that it was done in a crunch and it was not intended to be a commingling situation. Another thing that people don't think about when they think about commingling is commingling other assets other than money, meaning a lot of people will go and put their home in their corporation's name, for whatever reason. Maybe they think that that's going to keep them, anonymous. People won't be able to see what they own when, because, obviously home ownership is a public record, deeds are a public record, things like that. Or maybe the company has better credits, than the individual or whatever the case may be. But it really will hit you hard when they start searching for corporate assets in order to pay off some type of liability or debt. And next thing you know, your home is in your corporation's name, and you are, getting a notice of lien and possible foreclosure because you lost in court, and now they can come after that corporate asset. Same thing for titles to cars. That's one of the bigger things that we see. They want to call it a company car or a corporate car, but really you're doing everything in that car, taking the kids to school, running errands, going out of town to see Big Mama. Everything is happening in that car, and that's your only ride. And now it's going to be, seized as a corporate asset. So it's just never a good idea unless it's truly a corporate, car or a corporate perk, and it is, clearly identified as such, and it's not just something you're doing as an individual sole proprietor, or somebody who would otherwise be a sole proprietor, I should say. You're, a single entity LLC or a single entity, single owner corporation. So just keep all of that in mind. The last thing being under commingling, being using your business credit card to buy personal items. That's another thing, a big thing that people will do and try to write it off or try, and that goes into the fraud part that Janelle, I have in my notes, and Janelle was talking about earlier, or Janae, I'm sorry. That can be looked at as fraudulent, especially if you're trying to write those things off as business expenditures on your taxes, when good and well that the furniture went into your home and not into your business. So things like that.
Segue about a car, since you mentioned cars, one thing that you also have to keep in mind is when you're running a business, if you have sole proprietorship, but even if you don't, when it comes to your vehicles, your home insurance, make sure you have consider having the highest policy limits. And that is because if for any reason your personal assets do become at risk, right? If you are if the corporate veil is pierced and potentially you could lose your car, here's an example I like to give. If you get in a car accident, right? You get in a car accident, it causes a bunch of damage, and you have the lowest policy limits possible.
Yeah.
What people tend to do, specifically if you're in an industry where people just like to sue people, right? Like entertainers, lawyers, doctors, anybody who people think make a lot of money, they automatically decide they want to start filing lawsuits. Well, if you have a higher policy limit, the chances of your insurance company covering whatever loss may be your fault, if you get in an accident and it's deemed to be your fault, then your insurance could cover it versus those people being able to come after you for that liability as well. So that's just a random sidebar that I like to tell people that people just don't naturally think of. So let's segue into tip number 3, mistake number 3 to avoid, which is
no contracts or inadequate contracts. That's me. So Listen, I said before when we talked about sort of the business planning with regards to contracts and having that who, what, where, when, why, and how. It's so important to know those in an agreement, to have clear communication as to what you're contracting for, what you expect to give, what you expect to receive. But the first things first, when you create an entity, you should be creating a contract between the shareholders or the members, whether that's a corporation or an LLC, and that entity. And a lot of people don't necessarily do that. We don't have our operating agreements for an LLC or our shareholder agreement and bylaws for a corporation. You not having those items means that you operate based on the law in your state and not based on the way that you necessarily desire to operate.
Absolutely.
Right? So one of the things that I think is really important for us to note, for instance, if I enter into a business with someone and my desire is that they're never able to sell their interest in that business unless they sell it back to me, or we dissolve the business, the only way for me to be able to make sure that that happens is to put it in either my shareholder agreement or in my operating agreement for an LLC. When you don't create an agreement, then you've positioned yourself again to have to revert back to simply what the law says, which gives you a minimum. And I've seen a lot of people that say, well, what's the point? Why should I have an operating agreement? I don't need a 12-page document. I don't need a 22-page document, because they can be very lengthy. But it's because
absolutely,
you've got to be able to say, and we're fleshing out then again, that who, what, where, when, why, and how. Why is it that I don't want this particular individual that I go into business with to be able to sell their shares? I don't want to have to work with somebody I don't know. If you don't want to have to have other people come in that you don't know, that don't have the same business ideas that you have, that won't move forward in the way that you desire to move forward with, then you put it in your agreements up front. And when you put that in your agreements, you can modify your agreement. You can always come back to the table and say, yeah, we want to make some changes. But if you don't have an agreement in place from the beginning, then oftentimes you can end up where you have to have a nasty divorce, because businesses divorce also. Right?
That's absolutely true. Absolutely true.
This nasty divorce, we've got to figure out what assets are going to go to you when we wind down, what will go. All of that can be placed in an agreement the same way we would do a prenuptial agreement if you're getting into a marriage. And it's just to say, we get along now. We're getting into this venture because we get along, because we desire to do something great together. But it doesn't mean that 10 years down the line that we're going to have that same idea and that same thought process. We are forever changing and forever growing. And sometimes we grow apart. And in the event that that happens, you want to make sure that you've got your paperwork in place. And then other things such as like key man insurance, where if one of us gets sick, we want to make sure, and you get sick to the point that you can't work, you want to have in the agreement that you're carrying insurance that covers the business, because you can't do anything.
That's right.
If you have that desire and you didn't put an agreement in place, then again, the only thing you can force those other individuals to do is go by what the law says. And that's the contracts, the contracts that govern the business. I've got another point on that, but if anyone wants to jump in on the contracts that govern the business, then I'll give you an opportunity to do that.
I just want to say that this is especially important, and I see this mistake all the time when you are doing business with friends or family members.
Yes.
People think that because you're friends and you have a great relationship, a great friendship relationship.
Absolutely.
If you segue into a business relationship, that everything is going to run smoothly. You're going to be on the same page. You're going to have the same work principles, work morals, work ethic. And the reality is, though it does happen that way sometimes, right? Like all of these ladies that are on camera with me right now, we're all friends, but we do business, but we also have contracts between all of us. So
absolutely.
It's really important to make sure that you can separate the line between your friendships, your family relationships, and your business relationship, and run your business like a business, so that even if things go left and you dissolve your business, there won't be much room for misinterpretation or confusion as to what was supposed to happen in the business. And then hopefully, if you have to move on from that business relationship, your friendship can remain. So
everybody, and it's really just if you really just think about it, contracts in general, just from a practical standpoint, if everybody was going to stay getting along throughout a contractual relationship, what would really be the need for contracts? If everybody could just shake hands and trust that everybody's supposed to do, is going to do what they were supposed to do or what they, bargained to do in the beginning, then really we wouldn't even need the concept of contracts. What would be the point of even putting anything in writing? That is literally the whole entire point of the entire body of law called contracts, is because things that, can go wrong usually do go wrong. And so, or there is usually going to be some kind of ambiguity or some kind of confusion or vagueness or, misunderstanding. And so that is literally the whole point of a contract. And so being that it is an entire area of law itself, it might behoove you guys to go ahead and get those put in place. It's there for a reason.
It just is a boundary.
I have one more. Oh.
Go ahead.
I have one more thing to say, just in case there's anybody watching that, if they're like interested in nonprofit, I just wanted to put in a little plug for 501c3 nonprofit corporations. Shannon was kind of touching on, if we were to dissolve this corporation, what that would look like in terms of who's getting what. For nonprofits, for 501c3s, it's not the same. And I just wanted to put that out there. Specifically, again, 501c3, if your company or your corporation, I should say, dissolves as a nonprofit 501c3, you guys cannot just take that money or those assets and distribute them among the board of directors. That's not the way that works. The IRS will hate you for that and will penalize you for that. Instead, there is certain verbiage, even in your articles of incorporation, that clearly states that if this nonprofit is to be dissolved, those assets have to be donated to another 501c3 organization. So that's just something that I wanted to kind of put in there when it comes to bylaws, articles of incorporation, and just the overall expectations of a nonprofit, totally separate.
And the thing about the nonprofit organization is that it also doesn't have it. So where a corporation has a shareholder agreement and bylaws, you don't own a nonprofit organization. No. And so it's a totally different monster. But there are agreements that have to be in place, such as the bylaws and such as, and also that document that you file in corporation to show essentially what is going to govern that nonprofit organization and how you wind up things, how you dissolve that particular organization as well.
Right.
And we will be hosting a full business series where we'll go deeper into each of these in the coming weeks. So we're just giving you we're just going over some of the biggest mistakes that we see people make in business. But in the coming weeks, we intend to release a full series on business, and we'll be talking about the different tips and things like that, the little small nuances that people just naturally don't know about, that you can start to implement or consider when it comes to forming your business or running your business. So
I'm almost done. I just want to point out the last thing with contracts. So the first thing I said is that you need to have a contract that sort of explains how your business is run and governs the business, how you operate. The other thing is oftentimes we don't have contracts between the people that we do business with. We don't have contract, and I will say it as many times as it needs to be said. The thing that we learned in elementary school is so important, and I spit that thing out all the time because it's so simple. It's so simple for us to say, who are we contracting with? What are we contracting for? Right? What is that product or service? Why are we contracting with this individual? When do we need to provide that product or service? Right? And where? And then the big thing you want to know is dollar signs. What am I getting paid? How much?
Absolutely.
But I mean, people are operating, providing services, providing goods without having any contractual agreement in place with those people that you're working with. And so if you are a service provider and you don't have a service agreement that says this is what I will provide for you, this is when I will provide it to you, this is the dollar amount that you owe me for what I'm providing, and sort of breaks down all of those terms you again agree to, then you're just trying to go by a handshake, and handshakes don't work anymore. Though verbal agreements can be enforced, try enforcing it.
Corona stopped the handshake. No more handshakes. Corona stopped all of that. We need to have contracts in writing.
I might have to give you a little head nod or whatever.
There you go. Elbow.
No, you can't put your elbow. You sneezed in that elbow. So you
Right.
can.
That's true.
No, I don't want your elbow. But
So, and this applies to any type of business relationship. So the people you hire to do your websites, I've seen so
Right.
many people, right? They hire designers, graphic designers to build these websites, but there's no contract. So then when it takes 8 months to get the website done, they're like, you're taking too long. Well, what does your contract say? What is the turnaround time supposed to be? Oh, we didn't have a contract.
Mhm.
The
Right.
contract didn't say, one of the two, right? So, I mean, we literally, I mean, I know hairstylists do contracts. We
as they should.
literally every single area of your business relationships, your volunteers, your employees, your interns, the
That's
even
right.
the people you are paying, you know, the people you're buying
Vendors,
for.
everybody. Absolutely.
Yeah, and again, we'll jump into that. We'll dive deeper into that, you know, in the coming weeks. But just off top, just remember, you need to have some kind of contract so there's no room for misunderstandings. And then also,
Right.
since we're on the subject of contracts, and before we segue into the next tip or mistake, let's talk about the DIY contracts, the
Oh.
Google contracts.
Oh my goodness.
Because and here's my issue with that. Oftentimes, and Marissa said this in the very beginning, it's going to cost you less money if you get at me in the beginning than if you come to me to now fix your issue because you didn't know. Sure, I explained those simple things about the who, what, where, when, why, and how. That's so you can understand the terms that you desire to have. But you need to get to a lawyer that can assist you in drafting a proper agreement, because when you do it yourself, I had someone who drafted a residential lease himself. Well, one portion of the residential lease said that the law allows us, so you know, the law in the state of Florida allows us to have sort of an expedited process when we evict someone out of a home.
Mm-hmm.
That's a 5-day process as opposed to you having to wait 20 days for someone to provide an answer. You can get a default in 5 days. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because he had in that agreement that in the event that they didn't pay and after notice didn't pay for another 30 days, then he could file a lawsuit at the end of the 30 days, and that they would have to answer him within those 20 days. You just wrote yourself out of
Right.
Well, yep.
that is allowed for you to have. And then on the flip side, he had another clause that negated everything I just told you.
And just think, had he paid a couple $100, maybe $500 or sometimes even less, depending on the simplicity of the residential lease, he could have used that lease over and over again, had it drafted by a professional, used it forever, or at least, having, just maybe periodic checkups to make sure the law hasn't changed. Beyond that, how much money would he have saved? Time would he have saved? And how many tenants has he given that, that lease to that now, he's going to be bound by? So those are the types of things that that people don't think about. And this is why you hire an attorney, because you don't think about it. You don't think about it. You pay us to think about it, essentially. That's what we went to school for. This is what we do. We're designed, and our profession is designed for us to think about the things that you don't think about. And so go ahead and pay the little bit early up front. We would much rather. I know we are in the business of making money just like everybody else, but we'd much rather you come to us at the beginning than towards the end, when there's an issue. Now you have to turn around and possibly hire Miss Shannon down in Florida to do the eviction for you, and she's not going to charge you the same amount that she would have charged you for that contract. I can tell you that right now. Especially if your contract gives this other individual, your tenant, a bunch of defenses that they otherwise wouldn't have had.
And it's just really important, because I know that there are a lot of, you have a lot of these companies that have like the template contracts, and that's a great start. It's better than nothing, right? You'd rather have something in place than nothing. But once you get into the deep part of your business, once you're in front of a lot of people and you have situations where, your words could be twisted, the understanding of what's supposed to happen could be twisted, mistakes
Mhm.
can be made, whatever the case may be. That's the reason why you want to make sure that your contract is not cookie cutter, because my
Mhm.
contract that I draft, I have, several clients who are, for example, hairstylists, right? Every last one of their contracts are different. I have entertainers that are clients. Every last one of their contracts are different based on what their particular businesses are, what their particular
Mhm.
needs are, the way that they move, the
Yep,
money that they're making, the industry that they're in.
absolutely.
They're none of them are the same. So
Right.
None.
you send me a sample of whatever. Yeah, sure, I can send you a sample, but chances are it might not have what you need, therein. So just make sure that you take the time to make sure that whatever contracts you're using, whatever lawyer you're hiring, you're having someone, who does this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some things are not our ministry. I'm an attorney, right? I draft contracts on a regular basis, but whenever I have a contract that involves me, guess what? I'm sending them to one of these lawyers. Right? Like, I'm not reviewing my own contracts. I just had Shannon review a contract for me the other day because I know better. Like, I know that if I'm looking at a contract for myself, I'm not going to think about the things that my attorney would think about, right? Even though
Can't
my
be objective. That's right. Can't be
right,
objective. You're in it.
right? You're like, oh, money, oh,
Mhm.
opportunity. You
Yeah.
gotta remember, you gotta have that third person to be your voice of reason and be like, hey, they didn't consider this, and you probably didn't consider it either. So
Mhm.
that's just we were on contracts for a minute, but that was definitely my number one when it came to mistakes, is the whole contract thing, having the templates from Google, and y'all be using them Google contracts.
Girl, if we could get
All the
rid of
time.
Zoom legal, I promise you. Do we need to start a petition
Oh man,
to get rid of
I've
Zoom?
had so
Legal
many
zone.
trademarks bounce back, and we're gonna talk about trademarks in a second. But I've had so many trademarks come to me that need to be fixed because they got them done on one of those other sites that
Mhm.
But
Well, and
anyway,
the thing is about the tailored representation. I think that's a big thing for everybody to understand. When we're saying for you to go to a lawyer, we're not plugging just for the sake of plugging to say, oh my gosh, we need your money. We're saying that because just like I don't cut my own hair. I need a cut, but I don't cut my own hair. The water won't let my barber come to me, whatever. But anyway, there's things that I know that I'm not skilled in doing. We're talking about things that we do day in and day out, that we enjoy doing,
All
that we
day.
desire to do, and we also desire to help you. Our goal in this business as a whole, and I know all these ladies agree with me, our goal in this business is to make sure that we are helping the people who we come in contact with, that we are a resource to people who we come in contact with. So us telling you to not just don't get those Google agreements and those LegalZoom agreements and think that that is sufficient and that is going to work out for you in the long run when you've got a robust business, right? Is us saying to you, we're trying to cover your behind.
And trust
And
me, the
actually
judge is
read it.
just going to roll his eyes. I'm trying to tell you, or her eyes. They are going to be like, Lord Jesus, what is this foolery
I would say
right
read
here?
it too. When you have the attorney drafted, read it. Some things might be over your head, but a lot of times people do not read the operating agreements. They just say, "Oh, thank you," and it's like business in a box. But yes, there is excitement in forming your business, but read it. Read the operating agreements, the bylaws, whatever it is that you have, and understand it to the best of your knowledge. And then go back and maybe ask some questions, because you do want to have a full understanding. And I think that is the other side to having someone do it, whether you hire an attorney or not. When you have someone else do your business, you should be the first partaker of it. Be the first partaker in knowing that everything that my attorney knows, I should know too about my specific business. Maybe not anybody else's or the law in your state, but for your specific business, you should know. And that goes for contracts, taxes, anything. Yes, hire the professional to do it, but also partake in it so that you understand it too.
Awesome. So we're going to move into mistake number 4, and our communication strategist, Nicole. Oh, your mic is muted. One sec. Are you moving? Where is you?
She's moving.
Sorry, I am moving. My kids got loud, and I knew it was going to come to me for a second. Listen, we all got children. Whoever's at home, y'all home with y'all kids. I'm home with 4 of them, and they were rowdy. So I needed to leave the room and ask them to hush it up.
All right, so we are, if you guys have, before we segue, if you guys have any questions, please make sure you drop your questions in the comment box. I promise we're going to get to the questions. If you know anyone who could use this information, please share this with your friends and family. We just want to see everybody win. We are attorneys. We are, again, just trying to be a resource. This is what we do on a regular basis. And we just want to be able to share as much information, especially because right now, during this pandemic, so many people are starting businesses, dealing with business, trying to figure out what should happen with business. You have contracts that you don't know what to do with. And we just want to make sure that everybody has as much information as possible. So again, if you have any questions, now is the time. Don't call us after the fact and then like, about that free information y'all were given. I want to talk to you about mine, because then we're going to send you an invoice for a consultation.
And just really quickly,
go ahead and drop.
I want to follow that up. I want to follow that up, Marissa, by saying, you know, we are a professional firm, right? We obviously expect to get paid for the services that we provide, but more than anything, we do what we do for the culture. Okay. Now, the culture can mean whatever you think it means to you, but we do what we do for the culture. And we understand that many times the culture gets taken advantage of. Okay. And so when we provide this information to you, we know that it's because you might not get it otherwise. When we are telling employees, you know, things that the biggest mistakes to avoid right now, or ways to find what protections have been put in place for them, we do it because employers might not be, not saying all, but some employers might be counting on the fact that you don't have that information. Okay, when we did our tenants' rights conversation just the other day, we do it because we understand that some landlords might be counting on the fact that you don't know that you cannot be evicted right now. Okay, and so we are doing this for you free of charge, but because we just want to make sure that you guys have information that we know may not be readily available to you.
For the culture.
For the culture.
Wait,
y'all crazy. Anyway, so mistake number 4, since you're talking about communication, right? We're talking about the fact that a lot of people are not going to communicate the things that you need to know. Our communication strategists, and more importantly, the leader of our crisis management division, right? Nicole is the person that helps us clean up the messes on the back end. So you'll see us in court, but you'll see her dealing with the media. You'll see, you know, us dealing with the trial and the evidence and all of that stuff, but you'll see her helping our clients communicate in ways that get them essentially what they want. So mistake number 4, tell us about it.
Oh my goodness, this grinds my gears. Oh my goodness. So failing to communicate strategically. Okay. This is in personal relationships too, but in business, here's what you need to know. Our lives are infinitely easier when we are good communicators. Okay. So my job is to give you tools for how to approach your interactions, whether they be personal or professional, in ways that don't lead to misunderstanding, in ways that don't make your situation worse, in ways that won't get you fired. Okay. But instead in ways that foster growth and help to build relationships, and I just want to make sure y'all not out here flying by the seat of your pants. Okay. That you are communicating strategically in ways that are going to get you the desired results from your interactions. And a lot of people in business are out here flying by the seat of their pants. You are not communicating strategically. And so the biggest mistake that I see people making in that, I just have 3 points. I had more, but it's getting a little long. So I pared it down while everybody was talking. The first thing is never assume that what you are writing will be confidential. Never, ever, ever, ever assume that what you are writing is not going to be shared. We all like to think that if we say your discretion is appreciated in an email, that our words won't be shared. But one, folks are trifling. They are. And two, at the end of the day, people are going to watch their own back. Okay. So if you have something, if you have to put something in writing, you must assume that there is always potential that it will be made public if an individual, a former partner, an organization thinks that it may further their interests. Okay, I'm talking text messages, I'm talking DMs, I'm talking emails, I'm talking letters. Do not assume that this communication is only ever going to be seen or read by this person. It may be shared within somebody else's organization. It may go public, depending on your stature, depending on whether or not you're a high-profile individual who's running a business or whatever, even in your personal life. You know, there are many, we see instances all the time where people send something in private and it's made public and they're left holding the bag. Okay.
Yeah.
So number one, never assume that what you're writing is going to be confidential. And this number two is kind of just follows along those lines. Understand that your communication is not just for the person who reads it now. It's also for the person who reads it later. Okay. If I send an email to my boss, I'm not just writing it to my boss. I'm writing it to the HR director. I'm writing it to my boss's boss. I'm writing it to a judge, maybe depending on the type of industry I might be in. You never know what trouble might come down a pipeline. Okay. So you have to make sure that no matter who reads it, they will understand it, that your position will be cleared, and no one can spin it and say, oh, you know what? Nicole is actually the person who made this decision. As you can see, her email says X, Y, and Z, and you know good and well your email didn't say that, right? But also, you need to make sure that no matter who reads it, you will be portrayed in a favorable light. Okay? So again, number one, never assume that what you are writing will be confidential. Number two, understand your communication is not just to the person that you send it to in the to field. It's for whoever else may read it later. And you got to make sure that whoever might come across it is still going to look upon you favorably after that email is out there. Okay. And then number three, I'm skipping a couple points in the interest of time. Oh, this is probably the most important one. Do not communicate to be understood. Okay. Rather communicate so as not to be misunderstood. Okay. I'm gonna repeat it again. I heard it. I don't remember. I didn't come up with that. I mean,
that'll preach.
I'm gonna say that again. Look,
I didn't come up with that exact verbiage. Okay. I read it somewhere. I can't remember, but it's really what I try to explain to the clients. Do not communicate to be understood, but rather communicate so as not to be misunderstood. Everybody thinks that they've explained themselves clearly. Everybody thinks that, well, they should understand it. I said it right here. Okay, so after you write a letter or write an email or write a text message and you are about to hit send, reread it and say to yourself, okay, is there any place in this email where I might be misunderstood? Don't read it from your perspective and say, okay, I explained how I feel about this. Okay, I said what I thought about that. Okay, it's good. Let me hit send. Read it from somebody else's perspective and say, if I am this person reading this, where might they misunderstand something that I'm saying? Okay. And then go back and fix it. Okay. So in the interest of time, like I said, I'm only going to do 3 because I could do these all day. But number one, never assume that what you are writing will be confidential. And again, these are really just to CYA, right? Cover your own ass. I guess that's CYOA. CYA. Cover your own ass. Right. These particular tips that I'm giving is just to make sure that out from the outset, you aren't just jumping in, sending some stuff that might come back to bite you, and that you're just not being, I just want to make sure that you're being smart and that you're being strategic and that you're keeping just the basic things in mind. So number one, never assume that what you're writing will always be confidential. Number two, understand that your communication is not just for the person who reads it now, but it is for whoever else might read it later. Okay. If you are having an issue with your manager and you send your manager an email, make sure that if you have to share that with HR, you've referenced HR guidelines in their treatment or mistreatment of you, right? That if that same email has to be forwarded up the organizational hierarchy, that you've referenced the company culture And what the CEO says is the way that we will communicate with each other, and how we will come to the table if we have a disagreement or whatever, right? It's not just to your manager saying, well, I'm upset because you did that and that. No, you need to make sure that whoever else reads it knows that you got your ish together, right? And they can follow your points. And like I said, that you'll be portrayed in a favorable light, right? And number 3, don't communicate to be understood. Communicate so as not to be misunderstood.
Good
And that's all I got.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, mine is short because I'll be doing a full video on this later. But y'all know my number 1 was contracts, but we already went over that. So my other one kind of it kind of falls into the same lines, which is basically failing to prioritize protecting your brand, as in stop sharing your ideas and your trade secrets with people without having non-disclosures, non-competes, and or confidentiality agreements in place. I have so many people that come to me and say, so-and-so knew that I was starting this company, knew that I was, designing this t-shirt line, knew that I was doing this, and they stole it from me. Now they went and apply for the trademark, or now they've, started doing this with the same slogan, or whatever the case may be, right? And a lot of times people make the mistake of thinking that everyone operates in integrity. And the reality is, unfortunately, plagiarism is real, right? It ain't just real in high school and middle school when they tell you not to copy people. That is real in business, is real in a lot of things, right? So I just want you to be careful and make sure that you're paying attention to the conversations that you're having with someone. And this kind of goes back to what Nikki was talking about not assuming that what you're saying is going to be confidential, right? Like you're sharing something with someone that you think is cool until they take your information and they share it with their homie that's got the money to fund that business that you were talking about, right? Oh, I'm saving up so that I can start this, or so I can invest this, or so I can, go ahead and launch this. And while you're saving up, they take that information and they share it with their celebrity friend who's rich,
right?
And drop that bad boy the next week, right? And that's just a reality that a lot of people are facing. So just be careful and make sure that if you're going to be having lengthy discussions, if you're sharing your processes, your procedures, your trademarks, your trade secrets with people, you need to have them sign something that says that they are not going to share it with someone else. They're not going to take it and use it to compete with you, or whatever the case may be, right? So, and anybody who doesn't want to sign that is probably somebody who you don't need to be talking about it to. And that's the thing. People are, oh, well, if I do that, then they might not be interested. Well, then they just ain't interested.
They're just not interested.
Because if
anybody worth their salt is going to know that, though, they're going to expect you to have an NDA, if they're on the up and up in a legitimate business, nobody's going to have a problem with that. Yeah.
Right. So that's piece number 1. And then of course, the second piece is make sure you prioritize formally protecting your business, right? So you informally protect it, so to speak, by having the non-disclosures, the non-competes in place, confidentiality agreements. But then you formally protect it by registering your copyrights if you've written, created anything new, and registering your trademarks. So these things, and again, in our business series, we'll dive deeper into trademarks and copyrights and patents and all of that stuff. But just off top, I know everybody is brewing with their ideas and the things that they're coming up with right now, as far as what kind of brand am I going to start? What kind of business am I going to start? What am I going to do with that? I just want you guys to do it in a way that's smart, so that you don't mess around and while you over here planning and you done shared with 4, 5, 6 people, those 4 or 5 people are now taking over your business, trying to make it look a little bit different, so it doesn't seem like
right.
In reality, they stole all your stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Anybody got
McDowell's versus McDonald's.
Yeah. Coming to America right across the street.
Right. I mean, honestly agree with everything that you're saying about the protection. And I think that one of the things that people don't really understand is there are people who are not for you, and even if they say that they're for you, if they hear something that they like, there are people who are opportunists. We have to be careful, not just about making sure that we've got those contracts in place, but we still need to be careful about who we communicate with, because even if you've got an NDA in place, right?
Yeah.
An NDA provides certain remedies for you, but at the end of the day, if somebody has now gone out and put out that information that you've already given them, right, in breach of the NDA, and they don't have no money, you really, your main remedy is being able to stop them from using it, but now it's tainted.
Yeah.
And so you need to really be careful about who you are sharing your ideas with. Put the contract in place, just like we said. I don't care if it's your cousin, your mom, your dad, whoever it is. You want to make sure you've got an agreement in place. But if it's your cousin, your mom, your dad, whoever it is, you want to make sure you're also speaking with someone that you've got a certain level of trust with, and that you believe has your best interest at heart when you're talking to them.
Absolutely.
And even if they don't have that at heart, that they believe in agree in, when you have a contractual agreement, that they adhere to the contractual agreement.
Right.
Exactly. Marissa, I think you're muted.
I guess that would be helpful. I got to mute because my kids are loud. I can hear them I'm like, oh, mute, oh, mute. Does anyone have any questions? Because before we start to wrap up, if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. Thank you again for tuning in. To those of you who are watching the replay, thank you very much for tuning in. And for those of you, if this was your first time seeing our collective conversation, we've already hosted, I think, 4 or 5 so far. We've covered employee and things that employees need to know specifically during this pandemic and how it relates to, what your employers can and cannot do. We've covered tenants' rights and what your landlords can and cannot do. We've covered child custody and co-parenting while in quarantine. And today we're talking about business. Next week, we're going to be talking about business. We talked about communication and surviving your household during quarantine. We've seen a lot of posts from people who say that their kids getting on their nerves, their spouse getting on their nerves. People can't even breathe without them being ready to go off. And Nicole,
go on and watch that replay.
Okay.
I mean, listen, I don't mean to toot my own horn, but toot. I dropped some gems. I dropped some gems in that conversation. Please go and watch the replay. It's so funny. I was just telling Marissa, somebody that I know who knew about the replay literally, or who knew about the conversation literally the day after we did the Zoom chat or the webinar about all of these tips, all of these ways that you can communicate in a way during this quarantine, that you can set expectations, that you can work with your family, support each other, so that when it's all said and done, you all still actually like each other. The day afterwards, this person posted a series of Instagram stories talking about how their family is driving them crazy. And I thought to myself, why were you not on this? Why were you not on the conversation? So seriously, good tips.
Yeah. So we have all of our conversations will be uploaded within a week into the vault. A lot of times during this conversation, we also reference a lot of resources. We provide resources. We provide information, documents, downloads, things like that. All of that stuff will be located in the actual vault. You can access the vault by visiting bit.ly/the collective vault. The link is on the screen for you to just write it down. But, yes, we're streaming live, but the full replay, along with the resources and the things that we're referencing, are all going to be housed in the collective vault. So make sure, if you want, to watch those replays, click, visit that site, and you'll have access to all of it. So again, thank you all for tuning in. I do not see any questions. So I guess we covered everything, ladies. And thank you, ladies of the collective, for tuning in. If you are watching the replay, again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for those who watched this live. Is there anything that any of you ladies want to add before we sign off? Final words? No?
Just that we hope that this information was helpful.
Of course.
Right.
Really, that's why we're here, to be a resource for you guys. And so we hope it was helpful. If there was something that you need more clarification on, if there are any other topics that you want to see us cover, go ahead and drop a comment, let us know. And we all at home, so we can do these videos, whenever. So
We have nothing but time.
Let us know.
For sure. And you can find us on Instagram and Facebook. We are at The Collective Legal. You can visit us on the web. We're www.thecollectivelcm, that's for legal and crisis management.com. And all of us are also individually on social media. You can find all of our links on our collective social media pages as well. If you happen to need any kind of specific legal advice for your situation or any assistance or some consulting, don't hesitate to reach out and we will put you in contact with the right person. And otherwise, I see some comments. Hold on. Let me make sure they are.
It's me.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
So, otherwise, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next week. This is our last official one of this week, but we have not posted the schedule for next week. Follow us on all social media so you can get the invites ahead of time. Subscribe to our Collective Vault, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.